In this week's In-Ear Insights, let's talk about third-party relationship management. Now, Trust Insights is very often a third party, a vendor or a partner to other companies, and we in turn also have partners and vendors. And in the current economic environment, particularly in B2B and in tech, there's been tons of layoffs and things. A lot of people starting up their own things, a lot of people trying to figure out what to do next. A lot of companies in a position of, hey, we just laid off everybody, and now look, there's still a lot of work to be done. No one's here to do it. Well, I guess we better bring in some partners to do the work for us. So, Katie, for people who are particularly who are on the brand side, who suddenly find themselves with all the work but none of the people, what should they be doing? What should they be thinking about when they bring vendors in? Because I know the instinct is, crap, just bring some companies, get the work done now. And obviously, it's like anything. You don't want to bring in the first thing that comes along. Like, when you're at the adoption agency for your dog, you'll just grab the first dog you see. You test out the different personalities, take it for a little walk and stuff, and see if they gel with you. When you're evaluating a third party vendor of some kind, how do you take them for a little walk?
Well, let me backtrack a little bit and clarify that this is why I'm not allowed to go to the shelters and adoption agencies, because I would just take the first one and then the second one and then the third one and then all of them. But when you're bringing on a vendor or an agency or a contractor, any third party that you have to do relationship management with, it's an interview, and so, Chris, you and I come from the agency world where those interviews were often, a lot of glitz and glamour and sparkle, but not a whole lot of substance. And that's not to say that substantive work wasn't going to get done, but it wasn't the foot that we led with. It was let me just dazzle you with the bright lights and the pretty pictures. And to me, as someone who's now in that decision-making position, I don't want to see any of that. That does nothing for me. And so you first need to decide what your interview process is going to consist of. Do you want people to just give you big, flashy pitch decks? Or do you actually want to drill down into the weeds with them and understand what it is that they're doing? And for some companies, the flash and the glitz and the glitter is what they want, and that's fine. But you have to make that decision. You have to have that internal expectation going in. And then you need to really have a strong understanding of what exactly this third party is going to be doing for you, whether it's a piece of software, whether it's a contractor, whether it's a whole agency, if they're going to act on your behalf, if they're going to, if you're going to white label them, it doesn't matter. You still need to set those expectations. And I think that that's first and foremost where these relationships absolutely go wrong. It's a lack of expectation setting, both internally and externally. And so, Chris, if we were to bring on a contractor, if I just said, hey, here's Julie, our contractor, you'd be like, great, what's she going to do? You'd be like, I don't know, you wanted a contractor, here's a contractor, just go have her do stuff. Poor Julie's going to sit there and go, but what do you want me to do? How do I know if I'm doing the thing? How do I know I'm not going to let go because I didn't do the thing? And so expectations, first and foremost, is number one.
Are we getting someone named Julie?
No, we're not. Not today. Maybe tomorrow.
Not today. So when it comes to choosing these partners, though, I remember when at the old shop, the Dog and Pony Show was a lot of glitz and glamour, but in some ways that was appropriate because it was a public relations firm. You want to see some glitz and glamour. When you bring on, say, an analytics partner, you probably expect some level of polish and professionalism, of course, but you probably also don't expect dancing clowns and people dressing up and all sorts of interesting stunts. So how, if you're trying to evaluate a partner for a particular role, what are the steps you need to take to make sure that you choose the right partner? Because one of the things that I've seen happen an awful lot is companies make choices, and this is a human thing, based on relationships. And in some companies and in some industries, there's very much still the old boys club, and it's like, oh, this is my frat brother from 20 years ago. He's got his agency. We're just gonna go with him. And it's like, but is that the best fit? How do you figure out that, yes, while that person, that relationship may be important, that company may or may not be the best suited to do the job that you need them to do.
Well, again, it goes back to expectation setting. So really starting with, what is the problem you're trying to solve? And so if the problem you're trying to solve is, quantum mechanics, and your buddy's agency does, Canva images, it's probably not a good fit. It's sort of the old, don't work with your friends, don't work with your family. There's a reason for that, because the lines get blurred. And that's not to say that it's not an acceptable choice, but you really need to be objective when picking. And that's the other piece of it, sort of to your point, Chris, about the human piece of it. Let me do my buddy a favor. He's got this agency and they need some business. Let me just throw him a bone and he could do the work for me. That's not a great way to go about picking agencies for your company, because that may or may not work out. And then if you sort of involve that personal relationship with friends, if you have to say, hey, you're not doing your job, I have to let your agency go, it's going to be a harder conversation because you're more emotionally invested. Mm-hmm. So in terms of, if you work at a company that your decision maker keeps hiring, their friends, their buddies, there may be nothing that you can do about that. What you can do about that is wrangle the relationship in a way that you can demonstrate it's either working or not working. And that goes back to the expectation setting.
How do you define those KPIs? Because in some cases you'll have, maybe you're bringing on a social media marketing vendor, a partner of some kind, and maybe the person who's in charge is like, oh, this is gonna go tweet. I have them go tweet. What do you see as the most effective ways to set those KPIs for that vendor?
I mean, it's probably easiest to start with a user story. And so as a social media marketer, I want to, tweet more so that I can increase engagement. I can increase followers. I can increase awareness. And so by stating that user story, it helps you start to narrow down, like, what is the purpose of bringing on this agency, this vendor, this contractor, this piece of software that's going to automatically do the thing for me. And the so that is what becomes the start of your KPI. And so if I say, Chris, we need a social media person, your first question is going to be probably, what for?
Why?
Yeah. Why do we need? And I will say something, like, we're not getting enough awareness. We're not getting enough, our account isn't big enough. We don't have enough followers. People don't know who we are. So we need to be on social media even more. And so, okay, so I'm giving you these big, grandiose, goals. You, as the one who's setting the expectations, can start to drill down and say, what I heard my out of touch CEO say is that they want a bigger online presence. They want their digital footprint to increase so that people know who we are and what we do. Okay, I can work with that. And then you can start to bring it down into more granular KPIs.
Gotcha. So in that case, you have said awareness is a goal.
Yep.
If we were looking for a partner to increase our awareness, how would we go about? What are the things you think you would look for in a partner to build awareness? Because there's public relations, there's advertising, there's influencer marketing, and we have friends and colleagues in all these spaces. Where do I start?
I would start to look at our deficits in terms of what we as a company currently can't do, whether it be from a skill set or resource side. What are we sort of missing out on, and what are the things that bring in a lot of awareness for us? So we know that organic search brings in good awareness. We know that social media brings in good awareness, but neither one of those things are a focus for you and I at the moment, just because resources. It's not that we can't, it's that we don't have time. And so I would start to look at, okay, who can we bring in to supplement our existing content plan? Who can we bring in to not only supplement the content plan, but also share that content on social media once it's published, once it's live? And having those two things go together, to me, would be like, okay, that's the way that we, Trust Insights, can start to drive more awareness. But then I would also take a look at, well, what skills do we have that we're just not using effectively enough? And so that is the public speaking, that is the webinars, that is the, guest blogging, the, guest podcasting, all of those things that bring us outside of our own network into other people's networks. And so working backward from there to say, okay, why aren't these things getting done? We have the skills to do them. Maybe we don't have time to pitch ourselves onto other podcasts. Maybe we don't have time to clean up our content and put something together as a guest post. Maybe we don't have time to pitch that guest post. So that's where I would start to look for resources to help fill those gaps.
Gotcha. So it sounds like that's almost the middle core of the 5Ps, right? We have the platform, we got the stuff.
Right.
We don't have the time to execute the processes because we actually know the processes. We just don't have the time to do them. So really, for us, it is literally a people problem. What if, though, if someone is in a different situation where perhaps they don't even have the stuff? How do you help someone prioritize which partners to bring in? Because your CEO may say, okay, you have 10K a month to go get some help. Go get some help. How do you figure out, okay, well, which is the thing that's going to make the biggest bang so that I can get more budget, knowing that I've got to show some results early in the fast?
If you don't have any of the stuff, or you don't know if you have any of the stuff, you have to start with the 5P audit to really understand what you're working with. And so the purpose, that would be, I want to drive awareness. The people, okay, we don't have anyone to do the thing. And if we don't have anyone to do the thing, the likelihood of us having a process probably doesn't exist either. The platform is to be determined, and then the performance would be we have more awareness, and so more people coming to our website. And so that's where you might have to spend a little bit of time interviewing these agencies. Well, first of all, you have to you yourself have to decide what are the things that I am comfortable with our company doing that would drive awareness. And so let's just say it's social media and organic search. So it would be, content and posting. I would probably try to find a couple of different agencies who do those things and say, help me understand how you have helped your clients drive awareness before. What have you done? How quickly does it work? What are the methods? What are the tactics? And then what are the results? And so really challenging these agencies that I'm interviewing to demonstrate to me, I want to see real examples of where the work that you have done has made an impact.
How do you deal with a mismatch of expectations? Example, you have a out of touch CEO who says, "Go get me some more awareness," right? And then a month later comes back and says, "So, what was the ROI of that awareness?" And you're like, "But that wasn't what you asked for." But yet we know we've heard that story a dozen times. Back at the PR agency, every time the economy turns slightly sideways, the first thing the CMO at the client would say is, "What's the ROI of your PR?" And we're like, "Well, you didn't ask us to measure that, so we have no idea."
It's, the first thing that struck me about that question was, they said the example you gave was the CEO, the CEO says, "I need more awareness." And then a month later asked the question. That's the first problem right there. You have waited a whole month for the CEO to come back to you versus you proactively giving regular updates that would allow you to pivot if the CEO said, "You know what, that's not what I was talking about," or, "Great, I want to know how much this is costing me," or, "What's the ROI of this?" It's easier to get those things set up at the beginning than it is once you're 1 month, 2 months, 3 months in, waiting for the CEO to remember that they asked you for this thing. If they ask you for this thing on day 1, on day 2, provide an update. On day 3, provide an update. On day 4, provide an update. Even if they're small little bites of information, make sure that this stays on their radar so that on day 6, when they go, what is this? What am I looking at? You can say, "Well, on day 1, you said to me, I need you to drive more awareness. Here are the steps that I am taking to make that happen." "Oh yeah, awareness doesn't matter anymore. We need to drive sales."
We need leads. Yeah,
whatever. And so it's like, okay, I'm only 6 days in versus 30 days in. And that's a big, cost savings, time savings. And so in terms of the mismatch of expectations, make sure that you are putting those expectations front and center. This is what I understand you asking me to do. This is what I'm hearing you say. This is what I'm doing based on the statement that you gave to me to drive awareness, and just keep being as transparent as possible until they, and I will say 10 times out of 10, you're giving these daily updates, these weekly updates, and the person who you're giving them to is ignoring them. They're not looking at them, but it is documented. So then when they say on day 23, what are you doing? Why are you spending this money? You can say, oh, well, if you look at the 22 previous days that I have shared with you the information, I'm surprised that it took you this long to tell me this is not what you want, because I have 22 documented days of what I've been doing, and you didn't tell me to stop before then.
When you think about, in your role as our CEO, when you think about the vendors and the partners we work with, how do you measure their performance? Like, do you look at the ledgers and say, well, the ROI of this company is X, or the ROI of this company is that of X? Because when the economy turns sideways, people go from a growth mindset to an ROI mindset instead of how can I get the biggest bang for my buck. How becomes, how do I be the most efficient with my dollars because my budget got cut 25% or something like that. So how do you measure our vendors?
Well, I mean, it really depends on what they've been engaged to do for us. And so there is no one magic number. And I think that that's sort of the first place I would start. If someone says to you, what's the ROI? Like, that's the wrong question to be asking. And so, let's say, for example, we were just playing with some software this morning, Chris, that makes connections between data sources and gives you notifications. What's the ROI of that? Well, the ROI of that is that we got notified about the thing that happened so that we can adjust one way or the other. It's not a monetary piece. It's not a numeric figure to say it saved us, $10,000 by doing this thing. I think ROI is the wrong question. I guess I would ask you, because you're asking me all the questions. I want to turn this interview around on you, Chris. What would you say if you were asked that question?
It depends. And you hit it on it exactly. If the outcome is monetary, then ROI is one of a selection of potentially appropriate metrics, right? Obviously, you want things like top line revenue, like did this earn any money? And then, because if the answer is like, no, we didn't earn any money at all from this, then they're like, okay, well, then there's no point in asking the ROI question because there's no R in the ROI. And if it's a non-monetary outcome, then the question is it of benefit? And then what is the importance of that benefit? So, for example, if you hired me, say, a Ukrainian virtual assistant, that person saved me 11 hours a week of time, right? What is that time worth? Well, in one hand, you could say if you had, or maybe we're talking to the CFO, and the CFO is like, I need everything is dollars and cents, and there's no other language I speak. Then you could say, okay, well, that 11 hours saved at my billing rate is X thousands of dollars, and therefore I have X thousands of dollars more time that we could then book and bill to clients, to customers. And so if we're spending $1,000 to earn back $11,000 of time, then there's a financial measurement that the CFO could at least look at and go, okay, well, at least I know that you're speaking my language, and B, that you're actually keeping an eye on things and not just spending money and not having an idea what you're getting for it. For things where there just is no monetary outcome, it depends on the benefit, the big picture benefit. And that is, for example, if you're investing a lot of time, say, learning how to use the causal impact library in that is part of R, which is something I'm looking at right now. What's the value of that time expenditure? Right now it's zero, right? Because we're still learning what the heck this thing does and why it might be important. But then once it comes out of R&D, then it goes into production, and then they would say, okay, this is now a billable service that we can offer to the client. So you would track your time that you spent learning in the R&D phase, and then say, okay, well, Is there a likelihood that this is going to become a saleable thing that can earn revenue down the road? You've had this experience in pharma, right? Pharma companies will spend $5 billion on a drug to research, knowing that they can make $50 billion later if it succeeds. And so they'll invest kind of like a venture capital fund, 50 or 100 or 200 different research candidates, knowing all but one is going to be a waste of money, right? Because you'll find the 99 drugs that don't work on the problem. But if you find that one, then you can charge, $1.3 million per dose of this thing to people, and all the fun that comes with healthcare billing. But that's the process that they take, is they say, okay, here's a bunch of investments. We're gonna place bets. We know most of these bets are not going to pan out, but the one that does is really going to pan out. So some of the risk calculation we have to take into account is when we look at the things that we do with our time. Are those things going to pan out? If you take, 3 hours to have lunch with somebody one day, you're placing a bet on that person, right? If in a business context, forget if it's an actual friend, that's separate. But if it's a business meeting, like, I'm placing a bet. Maybe this person will work out. Maybe this person won't. But I'm going to place that bet and expecting 95% of them just to not be a good use of your time. But the 5% that are really worth it, or can be really worth it. So I guess that's the calculus that kind of goes on in my head when I'm thinking about how do I weigh the value of things that don't have immediate monetary value. The challenge for a lot of organizations is that if, particularly for publicly traded companies, you have very short time horizons to be able to show value before somebody says, nope, we're not going to invest any more in this. And some of those things that may be of greatest benefit may take longer than a quarter, one business quarter to show some results. And so you have to have a culture that is willing to assume a certain amount of risk over a long time horizon.
Well, and I was going to say, you're talking about it as if you are dealing with rational people who understand the research up front for the longer term benefit. But when you're evaluating third parties to get work done, it's the immediate, like, I just need something done now. It's the reactive. It's not the thinking through, I wonder how this is going to look in the long run. And I think we see this with some of our larger enterprise-sized clients where they just don't have the staff to execute, the things. And what ends up happening is they'll bring on, a third party, agency, vendor, contractor to get work done, but then they'll just keep piling on to this vendor without really thinking through, is this the right use of their time? Because they've already got them in the system. They've already got them working, and the vendor is probably like, okay, great, I can increase my retainer. I can get more money out of this. I'll just figure it out. And so the flip side of the conversation of that third-party relationship management is you, as the third party, really being honest with yourself and with your clients of, can I even do this work? And we've been there. When we first started Trust Insights, we kind of said yes to everything just to get our feet under us. And as, the company matures and we're going to hit, we're actually past the 5 mark, but our public 5-year anniversary is this March. We know the things to say no to. And sometimes it stings a little bit because you're like, well, technically I could do that, but do I need to be spending my time doing that? And I think that that's sort of the flip side of the conversation of that relationship management, is really having that honest conversation between the third party and the person who's bringing them on of, just because you can doesn't mean you should. And so, if we position ourselves as, a data analytics company and someone goes, oh, but I know that you in the past have done Google Ads, right? Can you do that? Our first inclination is probably to say, yeah, we can do that. But then when we really take a step back, say, does that make sense for us to be doing? And that goes, again, back to expectation setting of like, here's our boundaries. Here's the things we can and can't do. And for the things we can't do, we will help you find another relationship for that.
And you bring up a really important point of view there. There's a difference between hiring for competence and hiring for excellence. If you just want warm bodies and seats, right, then you're hiring essentially for minimum competence, and you don't really care about the quality of the work. You just want people off your back. If you are hiring for excellence, then you're hiring for, okay, what is this company good at that they specialize in, that there will be provable results for, right?
Mhm.
In your case, in your example, yeah, we can run Google Ads. Should we be running Google Ads? Probably not. Do we have a good track record of using Google Ads to generate results? Yes, because we focus on data and it's a data-driven system. But is it our center of excellence? No, it is not.
Uh-uh.
It is not our center of excellence. And while we can certainly pinch it when we need to, a company shouldn't hire us for Google Ads, right? So if you're
Right.
focused on excellence, if you want excellent performance out of Google Ads, we're not it.
Right.
If you want excellent performance out of Google Analytics, we are it.
Uh-huh.
Right. So it is the vendor, like you said, being forthright. Here's our centers of excellence. Here's what we're really good at. Hire us for these things. And it is then on the company to decide, do I want to hire for minimum competence just to put butts in seats, or do I want to hire for excellence, knowing that it will be a more complex set of arrangements? Because there is an appeal to the one-stop shop, right?
Uh-huh.
We have one vendor for everything, and that one vendor is good at nothing, but mediocre at everything. That's a company culture thing, right? You can't really change that, and certainly not as a third party. You certainly can't tell the company, yeah, you kind of hired a bunch of dummies, but your internal culture is also a bunch of dummies, so it kind of works out.
Well, and to be clear, both are fine. It's just a matter of what your company really needs. And so if you're hiring, just to, fill in the gaps for now, just to stop, the overflow of things happening, that's fine. But that's not a long-term solution. So having those short-term and long-term solutions are totally acceptable. So if you're hiring that one-stop shop who can just keep the trains running while you keep the customers happy, that's great, but not a long-term solution. So you need to have figured out, okay, great, we're going to hire you for 3 months, but my expectation of myself and my team is during that 3-month period, while you are just filling in the gaps and stopping the overflow, I need to also figure out a longer term solution. And maybe you, vendor, show me that you can step up to the plate and be that long-term solution. Or I'm also then interviewing other agencies to be that long-term solution, knowing that that interview process was just going to take longer. And I need to make sure that for right now, today, things don't, go sideways. And so
Yep.
it again goes back to, what is the problem you're trying to solve? And if the problem is, I just need warm bodies to push buttons, great. You can fix that problem. You can hire a third party who's going to do that for you, but set that expectation with them so that you can say, I'm not looking for a long-term relationship with you. I just need you to fix things for right now. Our contract is 3 months and we will evaluate at the end of 3 months and see where things stand. But I'm setting the expectation, letting you know that this is exactly what's happening with this relationship right now.
Yep. The one thing, and this is, I guess, the last point I'll make, is that because of the nature of change in the digital marketing industry, especially, but in all industries, a partner that is minimally competent is generally not adaptable, right? They generally cannot keep up with rapid change. A partner that has a center of excellence, they are focused on that center of excellence, and when things change in that industry, like we're seeing some massive shifts right now happening in SEO. SEO is in 6 months is going to look totally different than the way it does right now. If that's not an area of excellence for your vendors, and you need to, it's a core part of your business, that's an area where you have to spend some time looking at your 5 Ps, looking at your user stories and saying, okay, this is something where we cannot compromise on an agency that's merely competent. We need an agency that's specifically excellent at this one thing because the landscape is changing. So if you've got some stories about the way you select vendors that might be helpful to folks, why not pop on over to our free Slack group? Go to trustinsights.ai/analytics for marketers, where you and over 3,000 other marketers are asking and answering each other's questions every single day. And wherever it is you watch or listen to this show, if there's a channel you'd rather have it on, go to trustinsights.ai/TI podcast. You can find us on pretty much every channel. And while you're there, if you don't mind, please leave us a rating and a review. It really helps to share the show. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll talk to you soon.